Found out my sister inherited the beachfront condo behind my back. My stepdad said she was the one who held your mom's hand in her final moments. But I wasn't allowed to say goodbye. Then she mocked me at a family barbecue, saying, some people just aren't built for coastal life. So when the HOA complained about trash on her balcony, I just forwarded her message that said, my sister Daphne, 44 female, and I have always had a strained relationship, but what happened after our mother passed away made it almost unbearable. We grew up in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, right on the edge of the coast. We weren't rich, but our mother had inherited a modest but charming 2-bedroom beachfront condo from her parents. That condo was the backdrop of every birthday, every Christmas, every argument and reconciliation. We weren't just raised there, it was part of us. My mom was a single parent until she met Ray, her second husband, our stepdad, when I was 17. By then, Daphne was already slipping into her role as the golden child. I wasn't a difficult kid. I studied, I worked hard, and helped around the house. But Daphne, she floated. She had a way of laughing off consequences, getting people to fix her mistakes. It made me angry as a teenager. As an adult, it made me tired. Still, I never resented her completely. I believed that family came first, even when it was messy. When Mom started forgetting things in 2022, little things like boiling water until the pot burned, or calling me Denise, her best friend from college, I knew something was wrong. I'd already moved to Charlotte by then, about 3 hours away. I offered to come home, to help. She said no. Repeatedly. At the time, I thought she was trying to be strong. In hindsight, I now think she was being steered by someone. Or maybe she just didn't want me to see how bad it was. What I didn't know was that Daphne had moved in with her for a few weeks, which turned into several months. During that time, Ray, my stepdad, barely returned my calls. I texted Daphne frequently. How's she doing? Should I come down? The answers were vague. She's tired but good. Don't stress. You're busy with work, right? Then, in February 2023, I got a text from Daphne. Just one line, Mom passed on Monday. Funeral Saturday. Thought you should know. No phone call. No warning. No invitation. I sat at my kitchen table in complete shock. I called. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Eventually, Ray picked up. He sounded exhausted. I asked why no one told me. Why I wasn't told she was going. Why I hadn't been given the chance to say goodbye. She didn't want you to remember her like that, Ray said, flatly. She made her choice. I was her daughter. And Daphne was there. Daphne held her hand at the end. You weren't. That hit me in a way I can't fully describe. It's not just the pain of loss, it's the feeling that something sacred had been stolen from you. A moment you can never recreate or reclaim. My mother died without me. And for some reason, they made sure it happened that way. After the funeral, held without me, I waited. Waiting for a call, an apology, anything. Instead, I got a letter in the mail. A legal document informing me that the beachfront condo had been passed solely to Daphne. No mention of me. No split. No shared ownership. Not even a note. I tried to call Ray. He answered this time, but he didn't soften. Your mother thought Daphne needed it more, he said. You've got a good job. A nice apartment in Charlotte. You're okay. I couldn't even respond. I hung up. And for the first time in years, I didn't call back. The weeks dragged on. Daphne went radio silent. I grieved in silence. My mother, my childhood home, and, what felt like, a piece of my identity had all vanished in a matter of weeks. Then, in August, my cousin Beth invited me to the annual family barbecue. I hadn't been in years. I almost said no. But something told me to go. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I wanted to see my family. Maybe, deep down, I wanted to see Daphne again. The barbecue was a best place in Wilmington. Daphne showed up late, wearing this ridiculous gauzy cover-up over a designer swimsuit, even though there was no pool in sight. She acted like she was on vacation. Everyone flocked to her, as usual. I stayed on the sidelines, talking to a few older relatives. When we finally made eye contact, she raised her glass and said, half laughing, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Some people just aren't built for coastal life." Everyone chuckled nervously. I didn't. I left an hour later. But before I did, Beth pulled me aside. "You know, the HOA's been on Daphne's case. Trash on her balcony, ignoring warnings. She's going to get fined if she keeps this up." That caught my attention. When I got home, I remembered an email from a month earlier. Daphne had accidentally replied to an old group thread we used to use for family updates. In her usual careless style, she'd forwarded the HOA's warning and typed, "HOA emailed again. Trash thing. Whatever. Told them, sorry it won't happen again. LOL. It will." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was planning revenge. Not yet. But because something in me needed that moment to matter. She mocked me. She erased me. And here she was, disrespecting the one thing she supposedly earned by holding our mother's hand at the end. That condo was supposed to be a symbol. Of legacy. Of history. Of love. And she treated it like a hotel room she trashed and forgot about. So I forwarded the email to the HOA. Just forwarded it. No comment. No explanation. And I waited. About a week later, I got a call from Beth. "Hey, did you say something to the HOA?" I hesitated for a second. "Why?" "Well," she said, "Daphne's having a meltdown. Apparently she got a formal letter. Like, official. Violation notice and a fine. She's threatening to lawyer up, but, honestly? No one cares. They've been warning her for months." I didn't say anything. Beth paused, maybe expecting more. But I think she got the message. "Honestly," she continued, her voice dropping to a quieter tone, "it's kind of deserved. That balcony smells like sour shrimp half the time. It's embarrassing. Everyone in the building talks about it. And she never listens." Later that night, I checked my inbox. Sure enough, the HOA had responded to my forwarded message with a polite but firm acknowledgement. Something about how documentation had been helpful, and that appropriate steps were being taken to enforce community standards. I just stared at it. No joy. No real satisfaction. Just a little weight shifting. Then came Daphne's text. Just 5 words, "You think this is funny?" I didn't reply. I wasn't in the mood to babysit her feelings. Not after everything. A few days later, she sent another one. Longer. "I don't know what your problem is, but this petty shit isn't going to fix what happened. Grow up, Marla." That one made me laugh. Grow up? She was living rent-free in a condo she didn't pay a cent for, letting trash rot on the balcony, and I needed to grow up. Still, it brought back that nauseating wave of grief I thought I'd buried. I wasn't just angry. I was hurt. Deeply, deeply hurt. I lost my mother, and I lost the one place that made me feel like I had a foundation. And instead of coming together, my sister actively pushed me further away. First by keeping me in the dark, then by mocking me, and finally by pretending that she was the victim in a scenario she controlled from start to finish. It wasn't just about the condo. It was about the memory of our mother. About the years I spent driving down to see her, making sure her prescriptions were filled, balancing her checkbook when her eyesight got worse, doing the work that no one else wanted to do. And when the real moment came, the one that would have meant the most, she shut me out. She told me I wasn't needed. I never got to say goodbye. Daphne could have picked up the phone. Could have let me hear Mom's voice one last time. Could have let me be there, even just for 5 minutes. But she didn't. She chose to be the only one in the room, and she walked away with everything. I tried talking to Ray one last time. I didn't expect much, but I hoped for some honesty, or maybe regret. I called on a Tuesday evening. He picked up, like he always did, with that cold, unreadable tone. "Ray, I just want to ask you something," I said. "Did Mom really choose to keep me away? Or did someone make that call for her?" There was a long pause. Then, his voice, quieter, "She was tired, Marla. We all were. It was easier that way." Easier. That word haunted me for days. Not better. Not kinder. Just easier. Convenient. I didn't respond. I just hung up. Maybe that's what closure is, realizing the people you needed to explain themselves never will. And realizing you no longer need them to. About a week after that, Beth sent me a photo. It was a blurry picture of a for rent sign in the window of the condo. Daphne was trying to list it short term, even though the HOA bylaws technically didn't allow it. She was calling it a vacation retreat in her listings. Classy. I give it 3 months, Beth texted. I didn't reply. But inside, something small and quiet began to settle. The house I grew up in wasn't really mine anymore. But it wasn't Daphne's either, not in the way she thought. You can't inherit love. You can't claim memories like property. She got the title, sure. But I got the soul of it. I could walk that beach any day I wanted. I could stand at the pier where Mom used to sip coffee and stare at the sea. I could remember her the way I wanted to, without the shadow of betrayal whispering in my ear. And Daphne? She could sit on her balcony with trash bags and bad karma until the ocean swallowed her whole. But I wasn't done. Not yet. A few weeks after Beth sent the photo, the rental listing went live. It was on Airbnb, of course it was. Daphne called the condo a breezy oceanfront gem in historic Wrightsville and asked for nearly $300 a night. The pictures she posted were laughable. Crooked shots of the living room, a cluttered bathroom counter, a balcony view that included a neighbor's drying laundry. You could even see the half-full trash bags tucked near the sliding glass door. She captioned the listing with, "Charming family-owned property. Perfect for couples or small groups. Coastal vibes. Sunlight. Sea air. Simplicity." The irony burned. Family-owned, she wrote. Not family-shared, not family-loved. Just, hers. Beth told me guests had already started showing up. She lived 2 floors down and said there was noise at all hours, garbage left in the stairwell, cigarette butts flicked into the sand garden. One of her neighbors had filed another complaint with the HOA. She's going to burn that place to the ground before she even realizes what she's lost, Beth said. I kept mostly quiet. I was still processing, letting time stretch over old wounds. But something in me refused to let it go, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted someone, anyone, to acknowledge what had been done. Then, 2 months after the listing went up, I got another text from Daphne. Are you going to stalk me forever or just admit you're bitter? It came out of nowhere. I hadn't messaged her in weeks. I hadn't even mentioned her name to anyone but Beth. She followed it up with, "Newsflash, Marla, Mom made her choice. Get over it." That was it. That was the moment. It wasn't rage, exactly. It was clear. Cold, sharp, heavy. I wasn't angry because she got the condo. I was angry because she kept pretending she earned it. That she deserved it. That her half-hearted presence in the final days of my mother's life gave her ownership over the whole past. I didn't reply to her text. Instead, I sent an email to the HOA president, forwarding screenshots of the Airbnb listing along with highlighted sections of the community rules. No short-term rentals under 90 days. No unregistered guests. No exterior trash storage. The next day, I received a polite thank you note from the board, confirming that they'd been unaware of the listing and that it would be addressed promptly. 4 days later, the Airbnb listing was taken down. I didn't hear from Daphne. Not right away. But Beth did. She went nuclear, Beth said over the phone. Blame everyone. The HOA, me, you. Said people were trying to steal her peace. Whatever the hell that means. I felt nothing. Maybe a twinge of satisfaction. But mostly, just that same small sense of balance returning again. For months, I had walked around with this pit in my stomach, like the ground beneath my childhood had eroded. But now, inch by inch, I was reclaiming something, not the property, but the story. The memory. The truth. People started talking. A neighbor sent Beth photos of Daphne screaming at the HOA rep in the parking lot. Another one mentioned she was trying to argue her case at the next board meeting, claiming extenuating family trauma. I wasn't surprised. The thing about people like Daphne is, they believe the narrative only exists when they're at the center. They can do whatever they want, rewrite every version of events, and expect no one to challenge them. But I was done being silent. Done being the serious one who kept the peace. And speaking of narratives, I started going through old photo albums. I hadn't opened them since Mom passed. At first, I thought it would be too painful. But as I flipped through them, pictures of our birthday cakes on the condo's deck, our first day of school with the dunes in the background, even Mom sunburnt and smiling with a towel over her shoulders, I realized something that stopped me cold. Daphne wasn't in most of them. Not because she wasn't part of our lives, but because she was rarely present. At birthdays, she was with a friend. At Christmas, she'd flown to Costa Rica or lost her phone. I hadn't noticed it before. Or maybe I had, but never wanted to admit it. She showed up only when it was convenient. And when it wasn't, she vanished. Yet somehow, she ended up with everything. That night, I printed some of the photos. Made a little memory box. Nothing fancy. Just something I could keep in my apartment, my home. A place where I could look at my mother's face and remember the way her laugh used to fill the kitchen when we burned the biscuits, or how she'd chase gulls away with a dish towel when we tried to eat lunch on the deck. She was more than a woman of will. She was mine in the way that counted. Meanwhile, Daphne was spiraling. Beth told me she'd been threatening to sell the whole damn thing, just to spite everyone. Let the HOA deal with someone worse, she'd said. She started looking for buyers. Real estate agents came and went. Word spread through the building, and a few offers started floating around. But nobody bit. Not yet. The HOA's involvement, the complaints, and her reputation for being difficult were tanking interest. I watched it unfold like a slow-motion scene from a film I didn't want to be in, but couldn't stop watching either. A month later, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real, physical envelope, addressed in Daphne's handwriting, which I hadn't seen in years. Something about that crooked cursive made my throat tighten, just for a second. I opened it with equal parts dread and curiosity. Inside, a single page. Marla, you've made your point. You've been watching, sabotaging, and inserting yourself into things that don't concern you. I'm done. You win, okay? The condo's more trouble than it's worth. I'll be listing it with a realtor next week. Maybe this will finally give you the peace you seem so desperate for. D. I read it again. Then again. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer with my old journals. The same one where I had tucked away my mother's hospice information, her handwritten recipes, and the program from a funeral I wasn't invited to. This wasn't peace. Not for her. And not for me. It was something closer to defeat. But not mine. Beth called a few days later. She's leaving. I saw a moving van. Looks like she's packing up whatever she had in there. Is she selling it? I asked. Beth hesitated. I think so. She was ranting at some guy with a clipboard out front. Agent, maybe. She says where she's going? Back to Asheville, I think. Or maybe Charleston. She was vague. Honestly? I don't think she knows. That track. Daphne never really lived anywhere. She just existed in places until they stopped serving her. In the weeks that followed, she posted a string of vague, passive-aggressive updates on social media. All that usual Daphne flair. Black and white quotes about toxic people and family betrayal. One story post was a picture of the beach with the caption, "Some places just hold too much pain." I didn't engage. I watched silently as she packed up the very thing she used to boast about owning, the place she weaponized against me like a golden trophy. And now she was discarding it like one of her boyfriends after a minor inconvenience. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. But I did feel something start to loosen in my chest. Around the same time, I got an email from a woman named Rosalind. She introduced herself as the realtor working with Daphne on the sale and said she understood that I had personal and historical knowledge of the condo. She wanted to know if I'd be open to providing any insights that might help with staging or marketing it more authentically. It was bizarre. I stared at the message for a long time. Rosalind was polite. Friendly, even. And clearly had no idea she was stepping into a familial minefield. I didn't respond right away. But 2 days later, I sent a brief reply, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm not involved with the sale, but the condo meant a lot to my late mother, and I'd be happy to share some of its history if you think it would help a new family appreciate it." She responded almost immediately with gratitude. We exchanged a few more messages. I told her about the creaky floorboards in the guest bedroom that my grandfather never got around to fixing, the way the sun hit the deck just right at 7:15 a.m. in summer, the coffee shop down the street where Mom used to go every Saturday morning and order a cinnamon scone with an iced chai. Rosalind said that kind of detail was priceless. That buyers love the story of a home. I almost laughed at that. A story, huh? What kind of story did this place have? One of devotion. Of neglect. Of memory and erasure. Of love squeezed through a funnel of resentment and self-interest. A home haunted not by ghosts, but by silence. The kind of silence that grows when people stop looking each other in the eye, stop saying what they really mean, and start measuring worth in deeds instead of feelings. A week later, I got a message from Beth. "You're not gonna believe this," she said. "One of the buyers is from Charlotte. A couple. Retired teachers. They fell in love with the view, apparently. Said it reminded them of their first trip to the coast in the 80s. Are they nice?" "Super nice. I talked to them for a bit in the elevator. They actually asked me if I knew anything about the condo's history, and I mentioned you. Said it was your family's place originally." I paused. "What did they say?" Beth laughed softly. "They said that explained the warmth in it. That it didn't feel like a rental, it felt like a home." I didn't say anything for a while. My chest tightened, not with grief, but with something else. Maybe something like closure, though I wasn't sure. Daphne was gone. Ray had moved up to Boone to live near his sister. I hadn't spoken to either of them since. Mom's presence wasn't tied to the deed, or the furniture, or the property tax bill. It was in the scone crumbs on the kitchen counter. The scratchy beach towel she never replaced. The hum of her favorite fan in the master bedroom. The faint stain on the window from where she tried to tape a wind chime and it broke. That's what stayed with me. And that was mine. Always had been. Still, there was a piece of me that wondered if Daphne had just told the truth, if she had called me that week, if she'd said Mom wants to see you, if she'd let me be there, would this all have gone differently? But that moment never came. And I'd spent over a year grieving not just my mother, but the idea that my family had ever really been one. And now, it is almost over. The condo officially sold 3 weeks later. Beth sent me the final listing from the realty site. Clean photos. New lighting. Even the curtains had been replaced. It looked nothing like the place I grew up in, and yet, it did. You could still see the shape of our old sofa in the indent on the carpet near the balcony. The tile in the kitchen still had the small, pale chip near the dishwasher. Mom always said she'd fix it. She never did. The couple from Charlotte bought it below market value. The HOA fines, negative reviews on the short-lived Airbnb listing, and the reputation Daphne had stirred up in the building all helped push the price down. Significantly. Daphne had overplayed her hand, again. I later learned she was furious. The story from Beth was that she had expected to make enough from the sale to start a boutique somewhere chic and coastal, her words. Instead, after closing fees, fines, backdated HOA penalties, and realtor commissions, she walked away with barely anything. She'd poured money into a condo she didn't understand, burned every neighbor bridge she had, and lost the one asset she thought would keep her safe. No one forced her to do it. She did it all on her own. And the best part? All I had to do was let her be herself. That was the most satisfying revenge of all, watching her undo herself, one careless decision at a time. I didn't throw a celebration. There was no dramatic confrontation or courtroom drama. I didn't need any of that. Instead, I drove to Wrightsville Beach. I didn't go inside the condo. It wasn't mine, and I didn't need it to be. I just parked near the dunes and walked the shoreline, letting the water soak my feet, the salt and air filling my lungs in that way it used to when I was a child, barefoot and sunburned and trailing after my mom with a plastic bucket in one hand and sand in my shoes. I passed the building once. The curtains were drawn in the master bedroom. A small planter sat on the balcony, where the trash bags used to pile up. Someone had already begun to make it a home again. I stood across the street, closed my eyes, and said quietly, "I'm here now, Mom." And I swear, in that moment, I could feel her. Not in some ghostly sense, but in a real way, like she was folded into the waves, stitched into the sky, resting somewhere on the wind. Daphne never reached out again. Neither did Ray. And I didn't need them to. They'd spent so long trying to control the legacy, to shape the story. But in the end, they lost the plot. I never wanted the condo. I just wanted the truth. And now, everyone around us knows it. People still ask me sometimes if I'd ever try to buy it back. If I'd ever want to own that place again. I always say the same thing, no, because I already do. It's in the memories, the stories I carry, the love that never needed a deed or a title to be mine. And every now and then, I drive down to that beach, walk barefoot in the sand, and smile, knowing that some people just aren't built for coastal life. But I always was.